What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be continuing on with our GEONOSIS map guide by focusing on the defending side of the map, which is of course the Separatist army. If you haven't seen the attacking guide yet, then don't stress, there will be a link on screen at the end of the video, as well as a card up in the top right of your screen as well. There is a whole heap of information to get through in this one, so I'm going to go ahead and get stuck right into the video without wasting any more time. So just like the attacking guide, we're going to head straight up into the bird's eye view just so that you guys can get a good idea of how the map is laid out. This area in grey is obviously the out of bounds area, while the blue area is your team's spawn, and then the red area is where the clones will spawn. You'll have two different objectives to defend in this first phase, with the top one being the ATTE objective and the bottom one being the communications post. Now, like I mentioned in the attacking guide, most of the enemies are going to be heading straight for the communications post down the bottom there, seeing as it is much closer to both of the spawn points. Although, like I said, the top one is probably the more important objective to defend, so it's really up to you which one you do go for first. There really is only three different ways to go from the start. You can either go straight to the bottom objective, straight to the top objective, or you can also go through the cave system to get into this middle area here, but I'll touch on that a little more in just a minute. To get to the bottom objective, most of the enemies are going to be heading along this track through the little canyon area. However, some of them will definitely head through the cave system to try and get behind you and your teammates, so make sure to keep an eye on this part of the map as well. As for the top objective, there are a bunch of different ways for enemies to get to this one, so if you are going to defend this objective, then you'll need to make sure you stay on the move and keep an eye out from every single direction. Now, if you do decide to head to the left side objective first, then you'll definitely need to be prepared to put up a fight, as like I said, there's usually going to be 10 to 15 enemies coming your way, so the best thing to do is to find a piece of cover and then set up for any incoming enemies. A lot of people fall into the trap of pushing up too far too quick, which definitely isn't a good idea, seeing as you have no idea how many clones will be coming your way. The best thing to do is to brace for that first wave of enemies and take out a few from behind cover, and then once you can see that the attack has slowed down a bit, then you're free to push up a bit and try and set up a proper defense. The only issue with pushing up too far is that you're leaving the objective open from behind and leaving yourself with little to no cover, so when I say push up, I'd still recommend staying on the area where the objective is, but maybe just try and get a little closer to the down ramp so that you can see enemies before they do get too close. Like I mentioned earlier too, you will need to keep an eye on your back, as the enemies can try and either flank you through the cave system, or like I mentioned in the attacking guide, if they actually take control of the ATTE early on, then they can actually start spawning behind you. So definitely make sure to stay on the move and pretty much just keep an eye on every single direction. Now, getting back to what I was saying earlier about this middle section of the first phase, this area marked in green is a really good spot to get yourself, mainly for protecting the right side objective, but you can also see a really good view of the left objective as well, so this is a really good middle ground to set up. The best part about protecting the right objective from here is that you can cut off anyone that's trying to flank you along the track that meets with the green section, as you can see here, whereas the top three tracks will all make it past you without really knowing that you're there. Now, that may actually sound like a bad thing, but you will be notified when the objective starts getting taken, and since the enemies have already made it past you without any trouble, they're going to be assuming that their only threat is from this direction, which leaves them as easy prey for you to sneak up on and take out without much of a fight at all. Now, exactly like I mentioned in the attacking guide, for this phase and pretty much the whole map for that matter, you really can't go past the assault or specialist classes, seeing as their weapons are definitely the best suited to this map. The Assault's A280 and the Specialist's A280 CFE are definitely the best all-round weapons for this map, as they can do really well at long range while still letting you compete at close range as well. Some of the longer range weapons are still really good as well, however if you do find yourself in a close quarters battle, then you'll often find yourself getting killed unless the enemy is in the same situation as you are. You can still do really well with the heavy or officer classes as well, and I will touch on the heavy class a bit more when we move on to the second phase, but in terms of damage and survivability, I definitely lean towards the Assault and Specialist much more than the other classes. Now, if you do happen to get pushed back, then you'll be on to the second phase, and this one is a whole lot harder to defend than the first one. The first thing you're going to notice is how far back the team spawn is, and this can actually be a really big problem if you and your squad mates don't make the most of the squad spawn system, but I'll touch on that further in just a second. The objective of this phase is to defend the two hard cell transports, and if you have watched the attacking guide, you'll know that these have to be taken out with the help of the ATTEs, so essentially your job in this phase is just to take out as many ATTEs as you possibly can. time. They do have to get close enough to the hard cells to be able to fire off the ion charge, so the goal is to take out as many as you can before they actually make it into this area marked in red, which is a rough guess of the area which they can actually make the distance with the ion charge. Now, getting back to the squad spawn system, and like I said, it's absolutely vital that you and your teammates try to make proper use of the squad spawn. If you're up towards the action and you notice that all of your squad mates are dead, then the best thing you can do is to try and get to cover and allow them to spawn on you before getting back into the fight. Even if only one teammate spawns on you and then you die a few seconds later, that still means that you and your squad mates can still spawn on the remaining member so long as he stays alive as well. If you all die without being able to spawn on each other, then you and all 3 of your squad members will have to spawn all the way at the back of the map, which is obviously a good thing for the enemy. So like I said, make sure to keep an eye on this squad HUD down in the bottom left, and if you see all your squad mates are dead, then make sure to get out of the action until they have spawned on you. Now, as for the ATTEs and some of the best ways to take them out, when it comes to playing as infantry, the heavy class is by far your best option. All of their abilities are perfectly suited for taking out the walkers, and especially if you can get into an area where there aren't too many troopers, then you can deal some genuine damage to these walkers. The ion turret and ion torpedo combo is by far the best way to damage the ATTEs aside from using vehicles, and like I said, if you can manage to get some good lines of sight on them, then you can usually take away 1/6 of the walkers' health on your own, if not even more. Those two abilities combined with the sentry ability and an ion shot mod for your blaster are a serious recipe for success, and if you have a few teammates protecting you, or if you do get yourself behind some cover, then you can usually take out the walkers fairly quickly so long as you aren't in their line of sight. That's the thing with the ATTEs, they can really just melt anyone that's in range, so I often find that trying to flank them and damage them from the side or from behind is by far the safest way to go about it. And since they do become the default spawn points, then you'll rarely have to worry about enemy infantry, seeing as they'll actually be spawning ahead of where you are. Another little tip before I move on is that shooting the belly of the ATTEs will actually cause a lot more damage, however it is usually pretty hard to get close enough to them to do that, seeing as most of the time they'll be able to kill you before you can get anywhere close. Something that not many people know though is that right underneath where their middle legs are is a gap in the armor, meaning you can actually deal huge amounts of damage without having to get underneath them. And with the sentry or the ion shot on your blaster, like I mentioned earlier, this can deal massive damage while you're waiting for your other abilities to recharge. The ion charge for the Specialist NT-242 is also another awesome way to take out the walkers, and seeing as you can sit further back on the map, this is definitely a good tactic if you are struggling to get close enough to the action. Now, moving on to the vehicle side of things, and if you are confident in an AAT, then you're going to have an absolute field day on this map because these things are amazing at taking out the ATTEs. One thing I noticed is that people tend to use the siege mode ability a lot because it seems like it does deal a lot more damage. However, it makes you unable to move, which then obviously makes you a much easier target to the walkers, so it's best to only use that when your main weapon is overheated. Other than that, there's really not too many tips I can give here, as it is pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure to keep on the move and keep firing away at the walkers, and as you can see here, between you and 1 or 2 more vehicles, you can absolutely melt the ATTEs in just a matter of minutes. Now, if you do happen to get pushed back, then you will obviously move on to the third and final phase of the map, and to be honest, this one is almost identical to the second phase in terms of what you need to do, so this part will be fairly quick to go over, but I will still touch on anything that I think needs to be said. In this phase, the clones will have to try and push you all the way back and then take control of the capture point, but to do that, they need to get the ATTEs all the way there, so like I mentioned, this phase is pretty much identical to the last one, as your only goal is to try and take out the ATTEs before they do make it all the way to the end. Like I mentioned in the attacking guide, you will have a bunch of spider droids controlled by the AI that will be helping you, which you can hopefully see as we head on down towards the ground, and essentially the only different thing about this phase is that you should try and protect the spider droids if you do see anyone trying to take them out. Now, as for some of the best villains to use, and this relates to not only the third phase, but pretty much the whole map in general, Boba and Bossk are definitely the 2 best characters to play on this map, at least in my experience anyway. Not only are they both really good at getting plenty of kills, but they do also have explosive abilities, which is really helpful for taking out the ATTEs as well, especially if you can sneak underneath and fire them at the belly of the walkers. As for lightsaber users, Maul is probably the best to use as he can get around the map so quickly, but even still, this map is slightly harder for saber users, so I'd definitely recommend Boba or Bossk over anyone else in the game. One last tip for this phase is to definitely give the new Staff Speeder a try. These things can be pretty fragile at times, but I have had a bunch of games where I've done a lot of damage to the ATTEs with the staff, so these things are definitely worth trying out if all the AAT have been taken. As for the rest of the phase though, like I said, the tips that I gave for the second phase are pretty much all you really need to know. Just make sure to stick to the sides of the map, make the most of the vehicles or the heavy classes abilities, and essentially just do your best to stop the ATTEs from progressing. This is a super hard map to win as the defenders, so there is a really good chance you'll lose a lot of games, but if you use some of the tips I gave, then hopefully you will be able to pinch a few wins here and there. So that is going to conclude our GEONOSIS map guide, guys. Like I said, hopefully some of these tips did help you all out, and if they did, then make sure to leave a like down below to help support the channel. If you haven't seen the attacking guide, then make sure to check that one out as well after the video, as that one has some pretty handy tips in there as well. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.